Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm here on behalf of my colleagues Mojgan, Ghare, Caroline Wong, James Wallace, and Stacey Scott. And so this talk will focus around public large interactive displays. And so you might have seen them in public spaces such as malls, where they can give you directions. You might have seen them in train stations where you can buy tickets from. You might have seen them in museums where they provide useful information about exhibitions. And so they're pretty straightforward. You just walk up and use them. And for that to be true, some requirements have to be met. First, sounds quite obvious, but you have to see the display. So if you're not noticing the display, you can't interact with it. And the second one is you need to realize that the display is interactive, so kind of understand what it is about. And so if you fail to realize the first thing, this is referred to as display blindness, which describes the phenomena that people just pass by those displays and they don't see them. They're just blind to that. They might be paying their attention to something else, and so they're just not realizing that the display is there. And then the second one is referred to as interaction blindness, which refers to people noticing the display, seeing it, but not understanding that you can interact with it. And so the classical example would be a person walking by a display, seeing it, thinking it is just plain advertisement, while you actually can interact and engage with it. And so partly because of those issues and a couple of other ones, those displays out in the public haven't been used as much as we'd like to. And so this research kind of focuses around that, and we propose two solutions, or we try two ways to go here. One is animation, and one is a certain type of symbology to mitigate those issues. And so we had a 2x2 study design in which we try to test those two variables. So we had animation on the one side with proxemics and random as two conditions, and direct and indirect as two conditions for symbology. So pretty straightforward. Starting with the random condition, we had this information kiosk that we built. So the idea is pretty simple. We followed kind of like a bookshelf metaphor, in a sense that you could walk up to this display, pick up a book, and read the information about it. So that was kind of the idea behind it. And in the random condition, you'd see, such as here, books would tilt like randomly and open up in a sequence. And then proxemics on the other side was our main intervention here that we came up with. And so proxemics draws from the idea of different spaces that humans occupy in the real world. So there's like the personal space, which is reserved for you and your close ones. There's the social space for your friends, and public space for everyone else. And so the idea is, if we as humans interact in different spaces, why not use that in such a system? And so what you could do is, using tracking technologies such as Deconnect, put that on top of a display and kind of track where users are in the physical space. So we divided the space up into different zones, zone 1 to 3, referring to the original spaces that I introduced earlier. And so, for example, in zone 3, a person would just see a simple tilting of the books, while in zone 1, the books would start to open up. So this is a quick mock-up after the study. You can see an actor here walking by the display, and you see the books like slightly tilting. And as he walks closer, now he's in zone 2, the books would start to open up and reveal more of their information. And then finally, if he's really close to the display, you'd get this touch signifier, implying that the display is touchable. So this is on the animation side. For symbology, we had two different kind of versions, direct and indirect. Direct refers more to the traditional UI design, where you just name the things as what they are. So if you want to have information on coffee shops, you just click on the coffee shop symbol or text. And then in the indirect version, we kind of looked more into a suggestive way of implying things. So instead of coffee shop, we would have a person there that looks kind of depleted, and then implying that a coffee shop is a place where you can get the necessary recharge. And so we hope to kind of create this impulse here, the motivational aspect of behavior, trying doing something, which can be described by conation. And so conation is one of 3 mental processes besides cognition and affection. And so thinking of public displays, cognition would ask, what is this? Like, how does it work? Referring to the understanding of things. Affection, on the other side, would ask, how do I feel about it? Do I like it? And then last but not least, conation would describe this kind of impulse, as I mentioned, the motivational aspect of things. So in comparison to affection, you might like a system, you might understand it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you walk up and use it. And so this is kind of coming from advertisement, where it is used tons. So kind of, you want to make people buy your product, so you want to create this kind of impulse here. And so we came up with 2 different versions, 2 designs basically. The direct one, which directly states things as they are, and then a more indirect symbology that we went through a design process here to come up with these symbols. So that concludes our study design. As a procedure, we deployed this whole setting at the University of Waterloo. So here you can see the display. It got pretty crowded at some times. We deployed it for 4 days for 4 hours, so 16 hours in total. We counterbalanced the study design, so each condition was balanced. The key analysis here is that we video recorded everything, and so in total we registered 2,613 people passing by our display. And also we selectively asked people to fill out a survey after they interacted with the display. So we were kind of passively observing the scene, and as soon as it was kind of clear and the person was already leaving the vicinity of the display, we went after them and asked them a couple of questions. Coming to the data collection, this is probably the most important piece of the analysis. So we looked at the video, and for every person that passed by our display, we would check if they showed certain behaviors. So for example, did they glance at the display? Did they stop to look at the display? Did they explore the display, which refers more to trying mid-air gestures or kind of touching the display, finding out if it's interactive, and touched would be the final touch, actually engaging with the display. And so this kind of enables us to create this kind of audience funnel. So you have different stages, and for each transition you lose more and more people. So for example, in total we registered 2,613 people passing by, but only 853 glanced at the display. And so you kind of see it narrows down more and more, and in the end we just ended up with 51 people touching the display. And so we were kind of looking after a way to analyze this further. And so, for example, we wanted to know how many people do we lose from glance to stop, and do our conditions have an impact on that? And so if you do that and compare the people that glance to the people that stop, you run into contingency issues. For the people that stopped also glanced at the display, so you run into issues here. So what we did is we looked at the people that glanced and compared the people that stopped to the people that did not stop. And so you can come up with with these 2x2 data tables, picking a variable like animation here. And so this is done pretty simple frequency data that you can run tests on, and then we use the Fisher's exact test. So our original idea here was for animation was to mitigate display blindness, as mentioned earlier. So that was our goal, and so the way we tried to find out if we did that was by analyzing each of the transitions. So we received a couple of significant results here. We found that animation had a significant impact on glance, stopped, and touched behavior, in a sense that the random condition was always the one being more successful in causing more people to show certain behaviors. So like, for example, more people glance at the display in the random condition than in the proxemics condition. And that was kind of counterintuitive. Like we thought, we came up with this cool thing, proxemics, and like it didn't really work. Like it was exact opposite. So we kind of were looking at the video, kind of like checking our observations, trying to find out why this happened. And so one thing that we realized is that there's kind of like a tracking delay in the software and the hardware, in the sense that if you pass by the display and the books start to tilt in the proxemics condition, they would show up more on your side, in your peripheral, while in the random condition they might show up in front of you. So you might have a higher likelihood of catching them. So designers need to pay attention to those kind of things. They seem subtle, but like when does the animation actually show up is key to this whole thing. And then the social concerns, this is kind of like more observational. We kind of felt like people didn't really like to be tracked. So like, when you walk by the display, people were confused by it. They didn't know what to do, and we kind of think that this causes them to leave the scene and withdraw. And so, yeah, we're kind of looking into that a bit more right now with our research, trying to find out how big this factor actually impacts like this kind of stuff, because it might be pretty big actually. And so the last result here is that this is more expected in the sense that the random condition only offers touch. So if people in the proxemics condition can play with the system a bit by walking around, they might not walk up and touch it. So this is more expected, I guess. And then for symbology, our idea was to mitigate interaction blindness, and this is kind of hard to do, hard to measure, because we fortunately can't look into people's heads, minds so far. We only received just one significant result here anyway. So we found that symbology significantly impacted glance behavior, so we can say much more about display blindness than about interaction blindness. And so we were questioning and wondering why that happened. And a reason might be that for the indirect version, the symbology was a bit more appealing. The colors were a bit more saturated. And so that might explain that. To summarize, we found that proxemics was actually limited in engaging people into interaction. So while it is described as a novel interaction technique and it can be really fun and useful in some settings, to engage people, it might not be the right way to do that. And we need more kind of like understanding of like what people actually want to do in public spaces, in a sense that not everyone wants to show mid-air gestures or interact with the display. So it is like really like visually, in the sense that nobody wants to embarrass themselves in public spaces. We also provided a novel data analysis on this audience funnel that we then analyzed for specific transactions. And last but not least, we provided a first evaluation of this of Conation and public display design. It didn't work out as much as we'd liked it, but it was really interesting designing those kind of things and trying to find out if it impacted people or not. And so if you want to look more into details how we did that, I recommend you reading the paper. And that's it for me. I guess I'm a bit fast, but thank you for your attention.
Again, if you have any questions, come to the mic And state your name and affiliation before asking your question.
Hi, Raimund Dachselt, Technische Universität Dresden. Thanks a lot for this very interesting talk. I was wondering a little bit about that we also have to take into account the purpose of such a display. So what do you really want to achieve? Do you really want to attract people all the time? And how calm should it be, or how aggressive should it be? So I think this really influences the way how we should design such systems, and I wonder whether you have thought about it a little bit more, I mean, about the purpose and task of such a public display, which doesn't always need to be like aggressive, yes, touch me, but could be different.
Yeah, so this research was kind of focusing on, increasing the overall amount of interaction with the display, but you're definitely right. We're not going to create a scenario where everyone walks up and uses the display. So I guess designers should spend some time thinking about, like, who do you want to attract in a public setting? Is it, the kids that want to play around with it, or is it somebody that needs useful information for like an urban center? So kind of like paying attention to that and then designing the display accordingly. Always keeping in mind that people want to be subtle in public spaces, or most of the time. But then, people, like humans are all different all over the place. So in some scenarios, you want to have something like really interactive. Thinking of like a museum, for example, where people might enjoy that actually. So yeah, always keeping that in mind. Yeah, we try to increase the overall interaction, kind of causing people to walk up and use it without actually worrying too much about how they use it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mohammed from Zarland University. I noticed that all your essentially public displays are designed for mass interaction or for more people, but all your analysis was based on one user at a time. Mm-hmm. How do you think this could extend to mass interactions, and how do you think you can actually, because it made it easier for manual annotation, as I saw, because you manually annotated the videos. How do you think you can extend that into mass annotation, or using eye trackers, automated annotation of the videos?
More like for usage or for analysis?
It's more for, I mean, in the end, that the books open based on one user, right?
Yes.
So if there are multiple users, you can actually simultaneously do animation. So this is like an extended study in a sense.
Okay, so like for like an information kiosk might not be the right thing for multiple users. If you want to browse information, sure, you might do that with like 2 people, but as soon as it becomes more and more, I guess this kind of stuff is not the right way to do that. In general, I can say that most interaction happens in groups actually. We found that, yeah, most people that actually went there were kind of like in a group setting. So we kind of try to filter that out. But yeah, it kind of shows that people are heavily impacted by others in public spaces, and yeah, we need to keep that in mind. I agree. Thank you.
Time? Okay. Yes, hello, Michael Kipp, Augsburg University of Applied Sciences. Thank you for your talk. I was wondering about, since you're making a conclusion about proxemic interaction, and it seems to work pretty well in a living room context, as was demonstrated. So this is a public context, and I was wondering, when you showed the demo, whether the connection between I'm doing something and the system is responding to my action was clear enough in your demonstrator. So when books open up, I noticed that people approach it from the left side. It could open up on the right side. Did you notice something in your analysis, whether this connection was clear, that people really were aware of their impact on the system when they entered a more personal zone or intimate space?
So yeah, we definitely had people walking, like they realized something was going on, and so they were like walking back and forth, and then the books would tilt how they walked past. So definitely some people got it, like in a sense that they knew the display reacted to them. Other cases, sure, that happened too. People realized something was going on. They might have been tracked by the Kinect and by the system, they got confused by it and then they left the scene. So kind of like
As a follow-up, so I was wondering about feedback mechanism. I asked you last night. So if you display like a shadow of the user or some other method to strengthen this connection between user action and system response, have you thought about this, or have you discarded this as not being necessary for this scenario?
So this research is actually built up on a study that was exactly doing that. So using like a silhouette, like a shadow type of thing. That worked out a bit better. People understood that it is them that's causing what they see in the display. For this study, yeah, as I said, I guess some people got it, some did not as much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.